Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Mondac webinar in association with Villarasa and Anganko, who will be discussing the complexities of foreign employers engaging workers in the Philippines. My name is Dan Sampaio, and I'm joined by a brilliant speaker to take us through today's discussion. Rochelle Pomoy is a partner and deputy head of the firm's labour and employment practice group. She is experienced in both advisory and litigation aspects of Philippine labour law practice. She represents domestic and international clients on all aspects of employment and industrial relations, including general employment advisory and assistance, employee investigation, employment and industrial relations disputes, international transfers and global mobility matters, large-scale reductions in workforce and corporate restructures, and the employment aspects associated with corporate transactions. Now, before I hand over to Rochelle to begin today's webinar, a quick housekeeping item. You are able to submit questions by typing them into the questions pane of the toolbar on the right-hand side of your page, and we do encourage you to get those questions in. We'll answer as many as possible during our Q&A session. It's now my pleasure to hand you over to Rochelle to begin. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dan, for the generous introduction. I would like to welcome all attendees to this webinar, and we will be tackling the complexities of foreign companies or employers engaging workers that are physically present in the Philippines. We are being hosted by Mondac, and as Dan said, I represent the firm Villaraza ng Angkor V&A Law from the Philippines. Next slide, please. So we have in the Philippines very stringent regulations in hiring Filipinos outside of the country by foreign employers. So we call them overseas Filipino workers. With the advancement of technology, however, more and more foreign companies look to hire Filipino talents without flying them outside of the country. And so this is exactly the topic that we will be tackling right now on how a foreign company can engage a worker in the Philippines without that worker leaving the country. So the freelancers and gig economy in the Philippines, it's rising. And per the Philippine Statistics Authority, there has been a rise of about 208% in revenues from these freelance workers. So this is one of the arrangements we will be exploring because this is how foreign companies have been engaging, one of the ways foreign companies have been engaging workers in the Philippines. We will examine its legality in the lens of Philippine law. Next slide, please. So we need to be familiar with two concepts, the relationship of employment versus an independent contracting arrangement. So in an employment arrangement, you have two actors, the employer and employee, which we will differentiate later on with the actors in an independent contracting arrangement, which would be the principal or the client and the contractor. So in an employment relationship, the Philippine labor law on labor standards will apply. So even though it's contractual, there's an employment contract between these two parties, the law also imposes obligations upon the employer and to comply with minimum standards, which it cannot violate or reduce because these are the minimum compliance under the law. Next slide, please. So we have juxtaposed, we shall juxtapose an employment relation with that of an individual independent contractor. So in this particular relationship, the Philippine Labor Code will not apply. Rather, it will be the Philippine Civil Code because this is a contract between the client or the principal and the individual independent contractor. So we will explore these further as we go along in the webinar. Next slide, please. So in order to determine whether the relationship between a company and the individual worker is employment, Philippine law looks into two major tests. The first one is the fourfold test, which is um, so these are the what constitutes the test: whether the company or the employer has the power to select or engage the worker, whether the company or the entity has the responsibility to pay wages, the power of dismissal, and finally, the most important of the fourfold test is control, which is whether this entity has the power to control the means and the methods by which the worker does the work. So, if all four are present, the relationship is most definitely employment. But even if one is not present, for instance, the responsibility to pay wages is contracted out to another entity, but the control remains in the entity, then that is the employer and the relationship is one of employment. Next slide, please. The Supreme Court has also used the economic reality test, which is really an examination of whether there is economic dependence on the part of the worker on the other party, which is the employer. So the Supreme Court examined the various realities, the economic realities between the parties to determine whether the relationship is employment or otherwise. So these are the tests to determine whether if a company engages a worker, whether the relationship is one for employment or whether this is a contracting arrangement. Next slide, please. So, having gone through the basics of determining whether the engagement is one of employment or independent contracting, we have to confront the main issue. The main topic of today's webinar is whether a foreign company without presence in the Philippines can directly hire a Filipino worker who is physically present in the country. Again, we know that there are heavy regulations on hiring Filipino workers and them flying out of the country and doing the work in the country where the foreign company is licensed to do business. But what we need to answer now is whether there can be a direct contractual relationship between that foreign company who is not licensed to do business in the Philippines, either as a subsidiary, it does not have a subsidiary, does not have a local branch, nor a representative office. Is it possible for an employment relationship to exist? Next slide, please. So, if you comb through the Philippine Labor Code, the statutes, or even the decisions of the Supreme Court, there will be no express prohibition on a direct relationship. But it's not a direct prohibition, an express prohibition, but there are obligations imposed by statutes that will be impossible to comply with if the entity has no local presence, whether as a domestic corporation, a subsidiary, a branch, or a representative office. So, for instance, the occupational health and safety laws require a physical workplace where the authorities would be able to examine compliance with occupational health and safety laws. So, the tax code also requires withholding of income tax of employees. So several laws that affect employment require physical presence here in the Philippines. So with that, the inescapable conclusion is that there can be no direct employment relationship between a foreign entity which has no local presence and a Filipino worker who remains here in the Philippines. So if that's the case, what then can be done? How can a foreign company, a multinational who wants to engage Filipino talent, engage them legally? So we will explore three options. So the first one is through incorporating a local subsidiary or registering a branch or a representative office here in the Philippines. The second one is through engaging independent contractors. Remember what I mentioned earlier. And finally, through engaging a separate local company. As we will explore later, these companies are actually more commonly termed as employers of record. So we'll examine whether these are legitimate arrangements under Philippine law. Okay, for our first option, next slide, please. When we examine these options, we will determine whether the relationship is an employer-employee relationship. And that's crucial because, as I stated earlier, the minimum labor standards provisions imposed by Philippine statutes will apply in an employment relationship. So an employment contract is imbued with public interest. So while it is contractual, unlike any other contract, there are regulations imposed under the law that, even if not written in the contract, will be read into it by operation of law. So the first option, as I've said, is incorporating a local subsidiary or registering a branch or a representative office in the Philippines. So in this option, the foreign multinational creates presence in the Philippines. And so that will address the employment question, but there can also be other implications. Presence entails taxation and the likes, other obligations. So from the lens of employment, having local presence here means that the foreign company, through its local subsidiary or its branch or representative office, can now act as an employer because it will now be able to comply with the obligations imposed on employers by the law. So, briefly, although I am an employment practitioner, we work closely with our corporate team to help foreign multinationals establish presence here in the Philippines if this is the option, the route they want to take. So, a foreign-based principal with local presence can now hire its workers in the Philippines. So it must first either incorporate or register as a branch or representative office in the Philippines, and there are certain requirements for this. So the for incorporating a local entity, registering a branch or a representative office, the Philippine Securities Regulation Code will have specific requirements, and this is also something that needs to be registered with the Philippine Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay. So if you have a local subsidiary that is a separate juridical entity in the Philippines, although potentially majority or wholly owned by the foreign company, except that if you wish to incorporate in the Philippines, you have to determine also there's a certain industries that are regulated under the Philippines, so which would require ownership of certain Filipinos. So there needs to be a Philippine there's a negative list published by the Department of Foreign Affairs in coordination with the Securities and Exchange Commission on certain industries that are regulated. So that's also one thing that needs to be determined if you wish to establish your local entity. What particular purpose or industry will you be covering? So that's one of the things that needs to be checked. On the other hand, if the foreign entity only wishes to establish a branch here in the Philippines, it can register also as just a branch instead of incorporating a local entity. And in that sense, there will be no separate juridical entity. So it's just an extension of the personality of the foreign parent company. And that means, of course, that in terms of liability, whereas a domestic corporation with a separate juridical entity will have a separate liability as well from the foreign parent company. A branch is merely an extension, and therefore, if the branch is adjudged liable, the liability extends to the foreign corporation. The There is just an issue of, for instance, if a particular judgment is ordered by the local labor tribunal against the branch, in order to enforce that extraterritorially, meaning in the jurisdiction of the foreign parent, the winning complaining employee, for instance, needs to comply with the local laws on enforcement of judgment. So it's not automatic. It's still because still there is the principle of territoriality. So decisions or actions of Philippines, the Philippine government or any of the government agencies would still be valid within the Philippine jurisdiction, and enforcement of these decisions will have to contend with local laws in the foreign jurisdiction. Next slide, please. Now, some companies also establish a representative office in the Philippines. This is a representative office as defined under Philippine law is an extension of the head office and serves as a liaison between the head office and the Philippine-based clients or customers. So it has a very limited purpose for information dissemination, promotion, quality control. There will be no income earned or derived in the Philippines, and it's fully subsidized by the foreign entity. So some would begin with the representative office first and then will convert it into a branch. And eventually, some would decide to incorporate a local entity. So, whichever choice is made in how to establish presence in the Philippines, um, it will allow an employment relationship with the Filipino workers here. But as I've said, there can be other implications other than employment. So taxation will also apply. Register. You also have to contend with other requirements for registration in the Philippines. For instance, if you have a principal place of business in a particular local government unit, there will be registration requirements. And when you have presence here in the Philippines, you will also have to register with the Bureau of Internal Revenue. So all these things need to be content with because you have a presence already in the Philippines and therefore you'll be subject to local regulations. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you have a local presence already, if the multinational or the foreign company has local presence either as a subsidiary, a branch, or representative office, as I've said, there can be a they these it can already directly hire Filipino workers present here in the Philippines, and it must comply with Philippine labor standards under the Philippine Labor Code. Compared to our other jurisdictions, our laws can be strict, and there are certain statutory provisions that even if not written in the contract will still apply because they are enshrined in the Philippine Labor Code. Um, uh, Next slide, please. Okay, so I understand we have attendees here from different jurisdictions, but briefly to give you an idea of what are the minimum labor standards under Philippine law. So these are minimum working conditions. Let's just go through them. So first first off, there is a minimum wage requirement, and it is dictated by the region. So there are boards in different regions that actually set the minimum wage. There are certain exceptions, but it should cover workers in different sectors, agricultural, non-agricultural, and the employers are obliged to grant the minimum wage prescribed by the boards. The Philippine Labor Code also mandates observance of holidays and the payment of holiday pay. So there's a premium on holidays, and we have several holidays, regular holidays, special non-working days. They're listed in statutes, and additional ones can be added as well. So um, for multinationals, some multinationals we've encountered would be surprised at the number of holidays. So you need to be vigilant, because as I've said, there's a premium, and so the pay will be higher than normal. And so and this is the second is actually the premium pay is for overtime pay, 25% premium for work performed beyond 8 hours on a regular day, 30% premium for work performed beyond 8 hours on a holiday or rest day, subject to holiday rest day rate. So we have holiday pay, we have overtime pay, we have rest day premium. We are also legally mandated to pay 13th month pay, and the timing of the payment of the 13th month is also mandated by the law. And for relevant for multinationals, because some workers may be working in accordance to the time of the parent company. So if the workers are obliged to work at night, there is a night shift differential mandated by law, 10% premium for each hour of work performed between 10 in the evening until 6 in the morning. I'm just gonna go back to holidays and holiday pay, because a very common question we encounter is, if it is a holiday in the parent company's jurisdiction and not a holiday in the Philippines, or vice versa, what should be done? So there's this concept of holiday swapping, where by agreement of the parties, and provided it's submitted to the Department of Labor and Employment, the company, the employer, and the employees can agree to swap holidays. So Thanksgiving in the US can be swapped for something else here in the Philippines. So again, it's really dependent on the consent of the employee to be governed by the swapping. And of course, it needs to be reported to the authorities, the Philippine Department of Labor and Employment. Now, apart from those, let's just continue. So we have several leaves mandated by law. So you have holidays, and then the leaves are different also. So the service incentive leave is mandated by law. It's just 5 days. I understand the market practice is actually to give vacation leaves and sick leaves. It can be the service incentive leave under the law can be subsumed under both or either, but in based on the market practice, it's more than the 5 days required by law. Then you have the maternity leave. You also have paternity leave. Uh, Actually, parental leave pertains to single parent leave. There's also leave for victims of violence against women and children. There is a special leave for women who have gynecological disorders. Um, so these are statutorily mandated leaves that need to be provided to Filipino workers, Filipino employees. Now, apart from that, um, we have to pay separation pay for a termination that's by authorized cause under the law. So these are uh, terminations where it's not because of the fault of the employee. So such terminations as brought about by redundancies, retrenchments or closure, installation of labor-saving devices. So these are authorized causes that's without the fault of the employee. In that case, they will be paid separation pay under the law. There's a statutory separation pay as well, depending on the ground for determination. And finally, there is a statutory retirement policy. There is a mandatory retirement age. There is imposed by the law as to how much it is, how much the retirement pay is. So apart from these, there will be other statutes as well that may be material. For instance, the occupational health and safety laws will also apply in an employer-employer relationship. Now, the compliance with the minimum working conditions are monitored generally in two ways. The first one is when an employee actually files a case and looks into compliance with Philippine labor laws. And the second one is the visitorial power of the Department of Labor and Employment. So the law actually grants the Department of Labor and Employment the right to visit and examine. So it's like an audit of the workplace's compliance with Philippine labor laws. So that's one of the things why it's really impossible to comply with the local laws if you are not present here, because that visitorial power is exercised by the Department of Labor and Employment, the Secretary, through its representatives. So there are inspections, audits that are conducted, and they can look into your policies, the payments of mandatory government contributions. So all these, they check whether there's compliance with the law, and a failure to so if in case of non-compliance, they will actually direct the employer to comply, and if in case of continued non-compliance, there are actually proceedings that will be commenced which can result in fines, revocation of the registration with the Department of Labor and Employment, among others. So there are actually very serious consequences for failing to comply with the minimum working conditions under the law. Next slide, please. So, payment of salary under Philippine law is regulated. The employer cannot pay the employee less less than twice every month. So it has to be an interval of 16 days. Therefore, under Philippine law, you cannot pay just once a month, even if the employee agrees, because this is legally mandated. And secondly, the salary must be paid in legal tender. So it has to be in Philippine peso. And even if requested by the employee otherwise, ultimately it needs to be in legal tender. And finally, the employers cannot interfere with how the employee dispose of his or her wages. So you cannot just unilaterally deduct amounts on the wages without consent of the employee. So it is only through consent that deductions can be made, except for when there's it's union dues and they're covered by a collective bargaining agreement. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier occupational safety and health standards. There's been a lot of attention in compliance with occupational safety and health standards, and because of the seriousness of the approach in this issue, there are grave consequences for non-compliance. So the fines in Philippine peso can range from 100,000 per day of non-compliance. So to deter employers from violating this or from failing to impose safety requirements under the law, there are also um, s- the occupational health and safety law, as well as the rules issued by the Department of Labor and Employment, also mandate certain personnel required in the workplace depending on the nature of the work to be done as well as the number of employees. So doctors will be required, nurses, first aiders, and those should be in place. Next slide, please. So, in an employment relationship, there are certain statutes that mandatory compulsory contributions to these three government agencies for the protection of the worker. So, the Social Security Systems Law, or SSS, the both the employer and employee are mandated to have their portions for contribution if in favor of the employee. So it will answer for disability, sickness, the maternity leave, and other disabilities or contingencies. So it's a monthly contribution, and it's done through a deduction directly by the employer from the salary. So this is one of those legally permitted deductions. So there will be as I've said, there will be a portion for the employer and a portion for the employee, but both will be remitted through the employer. So that's one of the things also that will deter that makes it impossible for a foreign entity to comply with the law, because there has to be a local presence here that will make the contribution to the local agency here, the social security systems. Apart from SSS, we also have PhilHealth, which is the health insurance. It provides comprehensive health services to employees. And similar to SSS, there's also a component for the employee and a component for the employer. And this will also be remitted to the Philippine authorities, the PhilHealth. Finally, HDMF, it's actually more popularly called Pag-ibig, which is the government's efforts to allow housing for employees, members of Pag-ibig. And similar to the other two, there's also a component for the employee and a component for the employer. All right. Um, So if you have local presence, you are liable for actually all the responsibilities of an employer under Philippine Labor Code, but mainly for the wages of the employees and for any violations of the Labor Code. So if you receive a complaint filed with the National Labor Relations Commission, those are mainly the two things. There's a violation of the provision of the Labor Code, or there's been no payment of wages. So the violation of the Labor Code provision could be an illegal dismissal. There is no valid ground to separate the employee. The causes of action will really revolve around these. Next, please. So Um, and apart from the minimum labor standards for employment relationship here in the Philippines, one thing that's also important to understand is how employees in the Philippines are terminated. No? So employment is their security of tenure under Philippine law. This means that there can't be termination at will, nor can there be termination by mere notice. So it has to comply with the allowed grounds to terminate. So there are just two: just or authorized cause. So a regular employee under Philippine law can only be separated from employment if there is a just or authorized cause. Now, I said regular employee because Philippine law allows for a probationary period, which cannot exceed 6 months, where the employer is given an additional ground to terminate, which is failing to comply with the minimum standards for regularization. So, I will discuss that first because the other two, just and authorized causes, are very stringent. So, for probationary employment, Termination for failure to qualify for regularization needs to be done before the probationary period is up. So there has to be a determination of the fitness before the employee's probationary period lapses. Otherwise, if it lapses by operation of law, the employment is turned into a regular employment. And at that stage, you can only terminate via just or authorized cause. Now, how is termination done of probationary employment? So at first, at the time of hiring, it must be communicated that there is a probationary period, and number two, the standards for regularization need to be expressly explained. So we have encountered a lot of issues where the employee who's been terminated claims illegal dismissal because they weren't told the standards of regularization. So it would be good practice to put it in writing, have the employee sign that they understand the targets for regularization. So that if the employee fails to comply with the KPIs or the targets, then a notice of non-regularization will be the mechanism for termination of the probationary employment. Okay, and then we will move on to just or authorized cause. Next slide, please. Okay, so for just the difference between the two causes really is just cause is because of the fault or conduct of the employee, whereas authorized causes are dictated by business factors, business judgment of the employer. So for just causes, we have the major ones would be serious misconduct, willful disobedience, so insubordination can be subsumed here, gross and habitual neglect of duties, and this is where non-performance can come in. Remember, under Philippine law, it's not just non-performance per se will not allow the employer to terminate. It has to be gross and habitual neglect of duties. It has to amount to that. We have encountered a lot of issues defending dismissals only based on non-performance. So it has to be persistent because it's habitual, and it has to be gross, meaning it affects the very job that the employee was engaged for. And then fraud or willful breach of trust. So here we have the jurisprudence has allowed loss of trust and confidence for positions where the employee enjoys the trust and confidence of the employer, particularly supervisory levels and those with functions that are not ordinary rank and file. Commission of a crime or offense by the employee against the employer, the employer's immediate family, or duly authorized representative. So we have encountered where there's pilferage or theft of company property, and that can be serious misconduct, or if there's been prosecution already, that can be commission of a crime. And there are other analogous causes that have been recognized by the Supreme Court, but ultimately they would have to approximate the same severity as the others mentioned. So it's challenging to dismiss. So it has to be grave, the offense of the employee. Otherwise, the principle of commensurability of penalty will prevent termination. So if the employee has committed misconduct but not serious misconduct, the law will oblige the employer to impose a penalty less than termination, such as suspension, demotion, and others. Now, authorized causes are determined by the circumstances of the employer. So, if there's changes in the workforce because certain labor saving devices have been installed, then the employer is allowed actually to separate employees that it no longer needs, subject to payment of separation pay. So, among other authorized causes are redundancy or superfluity of the position, retrenchment to prevent losses, which means that the company is obliged to prove losses, closure or cessation of business, and finally disease. So if an employee suffers from a disease which is incurable for more than 6 months, and there is a certification from a competent public health authority, then the employee can be terminated. So the causes are different, and the procedure in separating are also different depending on the causes. So for just cause, because it's dependent, it's accusatory. Supposedly, there's a fault on the part of the employee, so the employer is obliged to actually comply with due process. There has to be a first notice, so that's where the employer needs to outline the offense and the potential penalty, and there has to be a period of time for the employee to respond, and if requested, there can be an administrative hearing before a notice of decision is issued. On the other hand, for authorized causes, provided that the requirements are present, the the notice is to the Department of Labor and Employment and the employee concerned. Okay. Next slide, please. In this arrangement, the first option, of course, there is an employer-employee relationship because, as I've said, you have a local presence here, and you can directly enter into an employment relationship with the Filipino workers here. Next slide, please. The second option, which can be the challenging one, is actually engaging the Filipino workers as independent contractors without establishing presence here in the Philippines. In this relationship, the foreign principal remains in their jurisdiction and the Filipino workers remain here in the Philippines, and the contractual relationship is independent contracting. So the workers are called independent contractors, and the principal, the foreign entity, is called a client or a principal. The contractors are engaged as such because they possess a unique skill or a talent or experience that has to be included in the contract, and actually also justified in the reality of the relationship of the parties, because the concept of contractors is that these are not ordinary employees, not ordinary workers. They possess certain talent, skills, training, which would justify why they are considered independent contractors. So when they perform their jobs, the principal or the client will control the results, but will not have control over how the work is going to be performed. So their means and methods are theirs, the contractors alone, and the client or principal will only be able to dictate the results. So there is if the foreign principal remains in their country of in their jurisdiction, there can be issues on determining work hours. So it's tricky to define the relationship because determining the hours of work or the specific time by which the workers need to perform their work can be a badge of employment. So it would be good to already input justifications for why there's a need for the worker to be doing the work on a specific time, even if they are independent contractors. Next slide. Okay. So because it's a contract, that's not an employment contract. It's not governed by the Philippine Labor Code, but rather it will be governed by the Philippine Civil Code. Except, of course, if conflicts rules will apply. So meaning if there's a stipulation in your contract, in the independent contracting agreement, that it's the local law of the foreign principal that will apply, then it will also govern. That will govern. So the foreign principal or the foreign company and the Filipino worker, the contractor here in the Philippines, can agree on terms and conditions because they are contracting parties that are free to stipulate the terms and conditions, provided that it does not violate laws, morals, good customs, public order, or public policy under Philippine law. So it's treated as any other contract with contracting parties of equal footing, unlike in an employment arrangement where there's already an inherent recognition of the imbalance between the worker and the employer. So next slide, please. So as I've said, it's a bilateral relationship of equal footing, parties of equal footing. The independent contractor possessing unique skills, talents, or experience, and the company, the foreign company. Next slide. So what's the responsibility of the foreign principal in a contracting agreement? We said before, for a foreign company with local presence, as earlier discussed, it has to comply with Philippine labor standards. It has to comply with the minimum standards provided by law, withholding of mandatory contributions. In fact, withholding of income tax also for the employees here. Now, are these obligations also obligations of the principal in an independent contracting agreement? No. The only obligation is actually payment of wages. None of the concomitant obligations in an employment relationship apply. Okay. Next slide, please. So the Philippine-based independent contractor will of course have their responsibility to pay their taxes because they will derive income from that relationship. So they will have to pay their own taxes. They will be considered as self-employed and they will have to register as such with the Bureau of Internal Revenue. So there's a specific process for the local Filipino worker to be registered. So if the foreign company is strict and would like compliance with Philippine laws, not necessarily labor laws, the company can require the contractor it engages to register first with the Bureau of Internal Revenue, so that it's ensuring compliance also with taxation laws in the Philippines. Next slide. Then, so these contractors are also governed by SSS, PhilHealth, and Pag-ibig, but they will be considered as self-employed. They're contractors who will be liable for the payment of their own contributions. So they're also compulsorily covered, but they will have to pay for it themselves. There is no withholding by a local presence because this is not an employment relationship. So we have Social Security. Next. Next slide, please. Pag-ibig, which is for the Home Development Mutual Fund coverage. And finally, PhilHealth. So you see, it's the same agencies and the same benefits, but the mechanism by which contributions will be made is different. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so if you're a foreign company and you breach the contract with your contractor, the contractor here in the Philippines can file a case for breach of contract, but that is subject to provisions on territorial jurisdiction of Philippine law. So for instance, Philippine courts will not have territorial jurisdiction. So if the contractor files a case here in the Philippines, it will have to go through the rules on service of summons to acquire jurisdiction over the foreign entity, the specific rules. So it can be complicated. Apart from this, there can be also a danger of misclassification of the relationship. Remember earlier we discussed the fourfold test and the economic dependence test. So if it's denominated as a contracting agreement, but in reality, there's control by the employer, by the foreign company on how the methods of the work is going to be done, then there can be a misclassification issue. The worker can file a claim here in the Philippines that this is actually an employment relationship, not a contracting agreement. Again, if it's filed here in the Philippines, there will still be issues on how to acquire jurisdiction over the foreign entity who has no local presence. All right, next slide. So is there an employer-employer relationship in this case? No. By the very definition of a contracting agreement, it's a different it's a different creation altogether. It's a different legal relationship apart from employment. Now, let's go now to the third option, which we have observed here in the Philippines, which is when the foreign principal engages a third party present here in the Philippines as an employer of record. So it's a third party that offers the services of being named as, on paper, the employer of the Filipino worker here. So they can be also called professional employer organizations. Essentially, they will, remember we said that there is a need to have a local presence to comply with obligations of employers. So essentially, these entities offer that service of being the employer on record, on paper, who will be withholding taxes, who will be remitting contributions to the SSS, PhilHealth, or Pag-ibig. Next slide. Um, so the EOR sometimes can engage the workers in the Philippines as independent contractors, but actually I would like to go to the next slide, which is the main and most common service being offered is they hire the employees as their own employees, but they will be in a service agreement with the foreign principal. The issue there is that, next slide, please. So it's a trilateral relationship. There is a local entity here acting as an employer. The issue is that the Philippine law does not recognize these arrangements yet. There is no specific provision of law allowing for this arrangement. Instead, how it's operated now is that these EORs are registered as contractors, job contractors in the Philippines, and they engage workers for the foreign principal. But they remain as employers. They're actually not just employer of record. They're actually acting as actual employer, because control, to legally have a contracting agreement, control must be exercised by the job contractor on their employees. The foreign principal will only direct the job contractor or the EOR. Next slide, please. Okay, so there is a case actually by the Supreme Court where it was unable to determine which one is the actual employer. Uh, can I go? Can we go to the last other slide regarding the case? Sorry, next slide, please. The next slide, please. The next slide. Okay, so um, if the EOR is only providing workers to certain principals, there's a danger that it will be considered engaged in labor only contracting, which is illegal under Philippine law. So these are the elements of labor only contracting. The contractor does not have substantial capital or investment. The workers are performing activities directly related to the principal business of the principal, or the real employer, or the contractor does not exercise control over the performance of the employees. It's instead, control is exercised by the principal. So this is also an illegal arrangement. Um, so, in conclusion, for EOR relationships, is there an employer-employer relationship? Yes, there is, technically between the employer of record and the workers in the Philippines. And the principal abroad, the foreign entity, will only have a contractual relationship with the EOR. There should be no direct control by the foreign principal on the performance of work by the Filipino workers here in the Philippines. I will close on this last case. Can we go to the next slide, please? The next slide. This case of American Power Conversion Corporation versus Jason Yu Lim is material because it contemplates a situation where it's a multinational which has presence in different jurisdictions. And while the Philippine entity is designated as employer, there's also other companies, foreign companies, exercising direction or control over how the work is to be performed. And this is very reminiscent of how, because it's multinational now, so as a company that's multinational can have regional officers employed by the local authority, but several others will exercise control over how work is performed. The Supreme Court has said if there's difficulty in determining which one is the real employer, everybody will be considered employers, and they will all be solidarily liable for any claims of the employee. So that's how the Philippine Supreme Court resolved that issue of the difficulty of determining the actual employer in a situation where it's multinationals. So I will end there, and I will give back the floor to Dan to allow, I know we just have 4 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Rochelle. Yes, we do have 4 minutes for questions. I can see that we have a number of questions in from the audience, Rochelle, and you should be able to see those as well. But just before we move on to the Q&A, I just want to say a big thank you, Rochelle, for your presentation, for your insights and expertise. We really appreciate your time, and I'm sure that our audience does too. So I'm going to move on to the first question that we received during the first part of your presentation from Druba, who asks, normally the contractors in construction sector pay the labour wages only if they are paid by the employer. How are your 4 tests maintained? Do courts entertain such disputes and intervene if in the contractor's activities?
Okay, so this is a very common situation in terms of contractors. So in this case, there will be a contractor that serves as a principal and dependent on the payment of the principal. But regardless of that arrangement, it's the contractor that will be liable for its own workers' wages. So it's what I understand that it's the contractor is really dependent on financing to the principal, but the law will not really um, wait for the principal to make the payment because the obligation to make the payment of the wages of the workers relies on the contractor. So there should be no effect in terms of if there's a delay in the payment by the principal under the service agreement, the workers still need to be paid by the contractors.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rochelle. The next question from Carolyn. Um, I would like to know, can a Singapore company, if a Singapore company cannot hire a freelance or fixed term contractor who is based in the Philippines, so the employer will be a Singapore entity, even though there's a local Philippines entity?
It can. So the companies are free to structure how they engage workers. So even if you have a local presence, if you wish to engage the Singaporean entity wishes to engage a contractor here in the Philippines, provided that the requirements we discussed earlier are present, it's possible.
Excellent. I'm going to move down to a question from Mitzi, who asks, whose law prevails when there are also minimum working conditions to be complied with in the foreign employer's territory?
So if the foreign entity has a local presence, meaning the relationship is employment here in the Philippines, it will be Philippine law that will govern. Even if your contract says, so if the company has an entity here and it's engaging Filipino workers, even if your contract says, English law or laws in other jurisdictions will apply, Philippine law will still apply.
Excellent. Rochelle, thank you so much. I can see that we've got a number of questions. These will be sent on to Rochelle after the webinar today. But we do encourage you, if you have a question that wasn't answered, please do get in touch. You can see Rochelle's contact information on the screen in front of you. We're at the hour mark now. Unfortunately, we could stay here all day talking. Rochelle, it's been a real pleasure to spend this morning, this afternoon with you. Once again, we thank you so much for your insights and expertise, and we thank our audience for being with us too. Rochelle, I'll hand over to you for any closing comments that you have.
Thank you. So, Philippine law can be challenging, especially for jurisdictions where employment laws are not as strict. So, we'd be happy to assist you for all your employment needs. As Dan said, the contact information is there. You could just send us an email for all your questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.